Wait for it. So yeah, Mario Kart 8, pretty big deal. The fact that you probably recognize that opening motif instantly says a lot. And with the Switch port's surprise DLC concluded, it's left fans wondering, where do they go from here? Nintendo's next console is on the horizon, and they'll definitely want a new Mario Kart on it quickly. Yet fan opinions are split between two potential paths. Should it be a regular sequel that taps into the truckload of new stuff the Switch era introduced to Mario's world? Or should it take the Nintendo crossover content that started in 8's original DLC and go as far with it as possible? Well, I say, why can't we look at both? How about we create two rosters, one for each potential outcome, along with two sets of 16 racetracks, or courses as the games call them, half set in the Marioverse, half based on other Nintendo series. Also, this is my personal take, not a prediction, so expect some creative reaches that might not happen in the real thing. Ready? Let's begin! Real quick, remember to subscribe if you've been around a while or if this video impresses you. I've finally reached 30,000 just a couple weeks ago, so thank you to everyone who's joined up so far, and I hope you'll stick around as I aim even higher. First, what guidelines are we following? You might have noticed that both have exactly 42 drivers, plus Mii's as their own thing, the same size as the base roster of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Still pretty big, but it does keep both from ballooning to unreasonable sizes. From there, the rosters are divided by character class. MK8 Deluxe has a lot of different subgroups with slightly different stats, but for the sake of my sanity, everyone here is placed into 3 base classes depending on size: small, medium, and large. Each has close to the same number of drivers. I also tried to include as wide a variety as possible, within certain limits, to keep the base game from getting too crazy, and again, so I wasn't stretched thin from brainstorming, the crossover content in Roster B sticks to series handled by Nintendo's EPD teams, with one exception. Kirby would have been too glaring an omission, and Hal would definitely be up for collabing, especially when Kirby's had a racing game before. Just know that this is meant to be a base game roster, so I showed some restraint. Now, let's look at who made it back. Starting with Roster A, which has slightly more veterans since it sticks to Mario characters, though 4 of them are honorary newcomers since they've only been in tours so far. Also adjusted Bowser Jr.'s size class, moved him back up to medium, where he was in Mario Kart Wii. Roster B doesn't have as many veterans, one downside of going full crossover, screwing over fans of characters like Dry Bones, Funky Kong, and King Babam. On the other hand, Rob is back from Mario Kart DS. He isn't on the other roster, and Link also got a class change, moving down to medium to make room for more big guys. This is our starting point. Now, what are this concept's new courses like? Kicking things off are the Mushroom Cup and Crossing Cup. Their easier layouts help players get used to the mechanics while letting expert drivers show off. Mario Kart's become such a big deal that I say we make a tradition of starting the first cup in front of a roaring crowd, implied to be the same stadium as an MK8, but with a ton of renovations, brand new layout, new in-universe sponsors, and newly set at late sunset instead of the dead of night, for a race that feels both familiar and like a breath of fresh air at the same time. Wait, this is awfully early for a DK course. Pulling double duty as home field for the Kongs and the token Early Cup coastal race, it takes players through the tropical sights of one of DK Island's beaches, including an underwater segment with a familiar-looking reef. But it isn't just the Kongs joining this time. King K. Rool barges his way onto both rosters. Got a feeling he won't be sitting out of stuff much anymore. Since we haven't had a new Mario Kart in a decade, this one's playing catch-up, like a course based on Super Mario Odyssey, set around the upper reaches of the Cap Kingdom. Driving around and atop monochrome hills and hat-shaped houses, it plays around with different elevations. Look closely into the fog and you might spot a shortcut. Oh, and Cappy himself is here too. He also found room on both rosters. Last in the Mushroom Cup is Mario's newest outing, with Prince Florian himself joining Roster A, getting help from a poplin to reach the petals. The vibrant fields, gentle slopes, and fancy fountains of the Outer Flower Kingdom might feel too easy, but once you reach lap 3, a wonder effect kicks in. The fountains go into overdrive, pipes come to life to block your path, and the hills start bobbing up and down in pattern for a wild finale. Meanwhile, our first crossover course borrows from multiple versions of Hyrule Castletown to make an original design. Racing through the plazas and streets of Hyrule's capital is the perfect way to kick off an Inter Nintendo competition, especially with Princess Zelda herself joining in. Might not have the spectacle of Mario Kart Stadium, but the locals cheering from the sidelines still give it a festive atmosphere. If Kirby's here, and he and DDD both are, we're taking full advantage. Don't let the grassland setting and simpler layout fool you, because just like Kirby's own games, there's more here than it seems. The longer the race goes on, the more classic enemies wander onto the track as obstacles to avoid, or pelt with items. And since this is from a Kirby game, expect some amazing visuals. Star Fox has been quiet for a while, but we can still give it something. Contrasting the last two courses, this high-tech race through Fox's homeworld happens while the Planetary Defense Force goes through training drills around and above you. I can already picture a long glide near the end that sets things up so whoever's in first place on the final lap flies alongside an R-Wing squad to the finish line. The Crossing Cup wraps up with its namesake, taking players around an only recently inhabited island. While different in layout from MK8's Animal Crossing course, it have the same cozy vibes, as well as 4 variants based on the season, with slightly different hazards and different villagers in the audience. Might not be an over-the-top challenge, but sometimes it's nice to end with something relaxing. That's our first set of cups out of the way. Not bad so far, right? Got a good range of themes in this group of 8. And here are the rosters so far with the newly revealed drivers. Got a lot of space to fill in still, so keep watching. Wait, you might be thinking, what about the Retro Cups? They're pretty self-explanatory. If the next Mario Kart is a normal sequel, expect the usual 16 remakes from past entries. But if the next game goes full crossover, I could see them skipping the Retro Cups for the base game, with the crossover cups taking their place. Does the setup I'm doing make more sense now? If we do get more retro courses, even if it takes until DLC, there are a handful I have an eye on that haven't been remade at all yet or have only reappeared in the mobile spin-off. Toad's Factory and Dry Ruins from Mario Kart Wii, Mushroom City and Bowser's Castle from Double Dash, Lakeside Park and the jump-heavy Rainbow Road from Super Circuit, Wario Stadium from 64, the only one from that game that hasn't been remade, and while the first Mario Kart has a few, Vanilla Lake 2 could get a cool double-decker revamp that goes above and under the water. And as of the Booster Course Pass, we're in remake territory. Some former retro picks could come back a second time for a bigger revamp. Options for that include Banshee Boardwalk, Delfino Square, Mushroom Bridge, and a whole lot of others. Bet you have a few in mind already. Up next, the Flower Cup and the awkwardly named Splat Cup. What new locales await our racers this time? First is the series staple. How do we get this Mario circuit to stand out? Inspired by different depictions of Toad Town, and partially the movie, the track would follow closely around the city roads, past Toad houses plastered with in-universe sponsors, and by decades-old monuments overrun with MKTV vans. Equal parts fantastical, modern, and kind of irreverent. We also have 2 new versions of Mario joining Roster A. One has a PhD, the other comes from a world of papercraft. We've had plenty of Yoshi-themed courses before, but none from this part. The caves underneath Yoshi's Island have a distinct aesthetic, with their open spaces, green-tinted rocks, and crystal formations. A race set within the caves would be a sight for the eyes, provided you avoid the bats, the piranha plants, and the chomp rocks rolling down from who knows where. Wait, one of those isn't a rock. Who let a chomp get behind the wheel? With Princess Daisy's upswing in attention lately, it's time for her home realm of Sarasaland to get something. Deserts are another Mario Kart staple, but we haven't seen this one in decades. Based on the first world of Super Mario Land, racers would speed through the desert sands, cruise by an oasis, and drive through an ancient pyramid with secrets and traps in wait. That Sphinx statue didn't just move, did it? Last in the Flower Cup is the personal retreat of Bowser's royal advisor. This is where Kamek goes to research and practice his magic, or when Bowser and the minions get on his nerves again. Expect all kinds of sorcery to alter your surroundings as the race goes on, from books flying around, to staircases rearranging themselves in different places, to entire rooms rotating like drums just to see if it could be done. Old wizards are a weird bunch. Opening the next crossover cup is our first from F-Zero. The 2 in MK8's DLC were fan favorites, so the devs would definitely double down. Set in a different part of Mute City, this one would have a new layout and new color scheme, set in the late evening with a brilliant palette of orange and green. But it'd have the same high-octane racing as always, with constant anti-grav, dash panels aplenty, and floaty physics making long jumps a breeze. Pikmin's signature racetrack would borrow from 1 and 2's Forest of Hope, then work in Pikmin 4's use of man-made structures for scale. There's a sense of natural wonder and inherent danger of being an inch tall in a big world. Just ask Olimar himself, and it'd be on full display here. There'd even be groups of Pikmin watching from the sidelines in the exact places you'd expect. Yellows in high-up spots, blues chilling on the water, and more. Another iconic Zelda landmark, this one takes after a couple past mounting courses by launching racers out of a Goron-built cannon that drops them off near the peak and tasks them with driving back down. Combining multiple versions like with Castletown, this take on Death Mountain would have volcanic rocks to dodge, metal platforms to trick off of, and the Gorons themselves rolling down the path alongside you. Capping off the Splat Cup is its namesake. Did you know several maps in the Splatoon series are located near each other? Starting in Inkopolis Plaza, racers go on a whirlwind tour through the urban streets that passes through multiple iconic locations. There'd be plenty of Inklings and Octolings around, not just the ones participating, and ink everywhere to slow you down and screw up your traction. Wait, are they running turf war matches while the race is happening? Typical. With courses set indoors, outdoors, and deep underground, we're officially halfway. How'd these cups measure up to the last batch? And here's how the driver rosters look now. Both are starting to fill out, but some heavy hitters have yet to show up. Now, we can't have a new Mario Kart without new items. Whichever direction the next entry goes in, we have plenty of material to pull from. Here are just a few they could use. From the Mario games, the Bubble Flower fires a spread shot of 3 bubbles forward, or a single one backward. If a bubble hits an item that isn't yours that is moving or stationary, the bubble picks the item up and neutralizes it while leaving a coin behind. 3D World's Cannon Box attaches to the front of your cart, because everyone's heads are different sizes. Press the item button to shoot cannonballs for a few seconds, and how you press determines what they do. Mash it for more shots that don't go as far, or wait and let the cannon charge for a faster shot that goes further. And while it might not be Cappy himself, a Crazy Cap-themed knockoff with a garish purple and green color palette can be thrown just like him. Toss it ahead like a boomerang, or spin it in a circle around you for defensive protection. You can throw the cap up to 3 times. For items from other Nintendo franchises, the hook shot is a Zelda staple that aims forward toward a driver ahead of you if one is in range. Latch on, and it retracts and slingshots you right by them. Doesn't slow your target down much though, and if you get too close while they're dragging an item, you might get hit. Splatoon's Curling Bomb can blow up on opponents, but this ink-powered sub-weapon helps you directly too. The ink trail it leaves behind as it ricochets around gives a small speed boost to specifically the driver who threw it, and if you stay in your ink, you ignore rough terrain too. And while it technically originated in Smash, the reflector has been a visible gadget on the Star Fox characters' models. This defensive item not only briefly protects you from any item damage, even blue shells, anything sliding or bouncing around gets reflected back in the opposite direction, but it has less range and active time than the Super Horn, so use carefully. And that's only scratching the surface. Bet you have a few ideas yourself already. The competition's heating up with our next 2 cups, and not just because the courses run from hot to cold to everything in between. Our token snow course brings a twist to the formula. We haven't had one yet set along a wintry northern coastline, traversing snowy beaches, cold ocean waters, and snow sculptures built by local toads and shy guys that feel harsh and welcoming all at once. And the sherbet part isn't just a name. The snow and ice here take on so many different colors that this frosty getaway looks like a giant ice cream buffet. Wario heard that Mario Kart Stadium was getting remodeled, and he did not want to be outdone. Taking his recurring arena course to new levels, this race set in Diamond City, with a couple of his employees joining in, has Wario's personal tastes applied liberally. Includes overly opulent decorations, WarioWare ads plastered everywhere, and a giant gaudy gold statue of himself smack dab in the center. The Flower Kingdom has some weird biomes, like the deep magma bog, an underground volcano system with giant plants that only grow there, a dangerous but fascinating place that plays with wonder effects in a different way. Wonder flowers dot the landscape in a few spots, and hitting one causes temporary rainfall in the nearby area, putting out fires and opening up paths for you and anyone tailing behind you. After an ordeal like that, no better way to finish the Star Cup than celebrating New Donk City style. This race through the city streets and high-rises takes place during one of their famous music festivals, with neon lights, fireworks, and cheering citizens everywhere. And because there's nowhere else good to talk about them, welcome Foreman Spike to Roster A. Thank the movie for making him relevant again. On the crossover side, a bunch of Nintendo's 8-bit classics have a course to share. This one's a giant mashup of NES games, with pixelated visuals mixing and matching for something retro yet new, including the start of World 1-1, a chunk of Zelda 1's overworld, a duck-inhabited forest, the streets of Urban Champion, and a segment of Excitebike track, with one of the riders joining Roster B as well. F-Zero steps up again with a wild racetrack set in a scorching alien desert. Drawing inspiration from GX for its visuals, it pulled what MK8's take on Big Blue did by having former background elements become track features. Gliding through swirling dust devils, speeding through glowing high-tech pyramids, fighting against waves of sand blowing across the path, pushing racers sideways in a double reference to Deathwind, and more. Next is a detour way up to the floating domain of the Angels, including Pit, naturally. With more glider segments than any other course in the game, this one would test players' abilities to maneuver in midair. And don't let the pristine atmosphere fool you, because a shortage of guardrails would make it every bit as challenging as the rest of the cup. Drive like an idiot, and poor Lakitu will have to work overtime. Metroid may only have one course, but it does not disappoint. This 3-segment race reenacts Samus's escape at the end of Super Metroid, beginning deep within Zebes as the planet starts to self-destruct. Racing through the Turian facility as magma begins to rise, drivers break out into the Crateria caverns above, crossing emergency ramps and going straight up the walls. Finally reaching the surface as the ground begins to crumble away, they reach the finish line and drive into a sized-up version of Samus's ship, safe and sound. How about that one? These two cups offer plenty of thrills and challenges to test your racing skills. On paper, anyway. And we've got just about everyone in both rosters now. Shaping up to be pretty good, right? But who could be left? A new Mario Kart needs a hook, right? More than just the roster? Some new modes and features would really help the next title stand out beyond its source material. Here are a few potential ideas. For all the flack Tour got, it did have a few things going for it, like its more intricate course variants. What if the next console game followed suit and had reverse versions, where you drive in the opposite direction? With additional ramps and cannons added where necessary, it'd be a unique way to experience familiar racetracks. And while Tour's main score-based gameplay met with mixed reception, it could work as a viable alternate to the core racing in a console game. Collect coins, pull off tricks and mini-turbos, and snipe opponents with items to build up combos and score as high as possible, while still racing well, since you get points at the end based on where you place. I don't know how practical this next one is, but some kind of course maker/editor mode would go a long way if it was doable. The Mario Maker games were popular, so there's a lot of potential to work elements from them into Mario Kart, especially a Mario-specific sequel. If the features were intuitive and had enough variety to let players get creative, it could be a hit. But there's something a different Nintendo-adjacent racing game did that Mario Kart could borrow from. A hub area like in Diddy Kong Racing. Could tie it to a new, expanded mission mode that builds off the one in Mario Kart DS, with a player driving around, clearing missions that double as ways to teach players different gameplay concepts, then challenging them with tougher stuff. Could even include an in-universe explanation for why a crossover sequel is happening. But now we have one more set of courses to go over. The Special Cup and Triforce Cup do not mess around, so prepare yourself. First is a follow-up to the Eastern Temple theme MK8 played around with a couple times. This one's high up in the mountains, a secluded retreat built to honor the region's guardian dragons. Expect ornate shrines separated by twisting mountain paths and views as amazing as they are dizzying. Look close during a glide near the end and you might spot an actual dragon flying far off in the distance. What happens when a hard-to-spot underwater reef sinks enough vessels to create a ship graveyard, then a colony of booze moves in? You get a unique setup for a racetrack that sends drivers through the moonlit shallows into darkened depths and on/through sunken ships with ghosts and giant eels in tow. You might spot Egad's portable lab up on the surface as he and his assistant are busy competing. And does one of those ships look like Gangplank Galleon? Like Bowser would let a Mario Kart game happen without getting in on the action, with a twist of its own. Inspired by the time he spent fused with the Flower Kingdom's castle, Bowser ordered this one renovated to look like it, including a heavy industrial theme, more machines and moving parts, and about half the lava replaced with churning green toxic waste, and some sick metal music, but he's had that for a couple games already. It just isn't Mario Kart without Rainbow Road. This one could stand out visually by theming itself after a light show. Set above a bustling city like a couple previous ones, the main path would be built out of translucent yet solid light, while images of famous Mario Kart locales are magically projected into the surrounding sky. And parts of the track itself are designed to resemble those courses' layouts, showing just how far the player and the series has come. Starting the last crossover cup with a bang is a second Kirby course that raises the stakes. Racing across and below the decks of Meta Knight's airship, you'll be bombarded by its onboard cannon and assailed by defense mechanisms like the airship part of Airship Fortress turned up to 11. Gives you the sense that Meta Knight's pushing everyone to their limits like how he always tests Kirby. And considering he's here too, he's also testing himself. Splatoon 3's story mode is set around a long-abandoned facility with some serious lore behind it, so naturally they turn it into a racetrack. As the sorta kinda snow course of the crossover cups, even if that's not actually snow, this trip through Alterna combines the hub areas with a handful of obstacles yoinked from the levels themselves. With multiple paths to take, sharp driving and quick decision-making are key. Now for a counterpart to Bowser's Castle. Nintendo's other biggest villain flexes the closest thing he has to an evil lair. Combining multiple past versions like the other Zelda courses, Ganon's Tower tests players' driving skills by reprising dark versions of the series' dungeon archetypes in rapid succession, going from burning chambers to rooms laced with toxic plant life to tunnels submerged in murky water. It'd take power, wisdom, and courage alike to claim the checkered flag. And finally, F-Zero comes back one more time with the toughest course in the game. Merging visuals from the original, GX, and some new stuff, this death trap of a race within a volcanic wasteland would weave around twisting flames, into fissures where lava flows like water, and through collapsing remains of the mining company whose hubris caused this hellscape. And no, I didn't forget, Captain Falcon himself is here to prove his racing prowess on the biggest of stages. Couldn't leave him out. There we are, not one, but multiple rosters of multiple types for the next Mario Kart title. 2 sets of drivers, one that sticks to the Mario games and brings in some deep cuts, the other crossing over with the rest of Nintendo. And 32 new courses to race on, 16 set in the greater Mario world, 16 from other Nintendo series. And there is so much more that can be done. There are multiple characters and whole franchises I couldn't fit into this concept, and multiple topics I ran out of space to talk about. What new battle mode arenas could there be? Or new kart parts to combine for unique loadouts? And what about DLC? With how successful MK8's was, the next game will probably get a lot of extra content. Would be a way to fit in ideas that didn't have room originally. Or if it's a crossover, bring in series beyond the original scope. Could add more EPD titles that didn't make the base game, tap into some of Nintendo's RPGs and their characters and settings, add Pokemon to the mix if TPC is willing to participate, or even add some closely connected third parties if they wanted to open that can of worms. But what do you think? How would you handle the roster, course list, and more for the next Mario Kart? Extra credit if you give yourself the same limits I had. Sometimes working around boundaries can give you the creative spark you need. Special thanks to the following for making this video possible, especially my patrons for the continued support. And we're gonna try something extra here. I want to dip my feet into more roster videos, so anyone supporting me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month can vote on which of these 3 will happen next. Not sure how often I'll be able to do these, but I think it's worth a shot. So, until next time, see you on the racetrack.